And before we close for the evening, I do want to say a little more about confession itself, because confession is part of the healing process of the church. And when we come to confession, we often think, first of all, that we can, a lot of people think they can only go to confession if they're going to take Holy Communion. That's because somehow there was an error in somewhere along the line, erroneously tied confession and communion together. You can have confession anytime, and whether you're going to have communion or not, you can still have confession at any time. It's very difficult for a parish priest to hear this pre-communion confession and actually give you anything positive in it, because people come into church 10 minutes before the liturgy starts. The priest is trying to finish the proscomedia, and yet they want to have confession. And if he comes out, he can give you, 2 or 3 minutes at the most, because the liturgy is about to start, and he might not have completed the proscomedia yet. So you're going to run in and say, oh, well, I've got my daily sins, or I lied, I swore, I got angry, and he's going to say, well, don't do it no more, and then read a prayer over your head. And of course, in the monastery here, we sometimes give people 2 or 3 hours for confession if they need it, because confession is not coming in to say, I broke a bunch of laws. Confession is part of the spiritual healing process, and sometimes part even of the spiritual, physical, psychophysical healing process. You need to give yourself enough time in confession to unburden yourself of the things that are causing you grief and sorrow, as well as the passions that you're struggling with, and the times that you've actually fallen into something. And really, you come and say, well, I swore, or I got angry with somebody, or even I punched somebody in the nose. And you say, well, God forgive me for those 3 things. And you might be told, well, go and do 1,000 knots on a prayer rope, or, you might as well go and kick 1,000 cans for that matter, if that's what you're going to be told to do. But anyway, you need to think seriously about this now. Why did you get angry and swear and hit somebody in the nose? Because there's something essentially going on inside you that needs to be dealt with. And that means a change in perspective and a change in direction. It doesn't mean, to say, well, I got angry, I swore, I stole money from the kids' piggy bank because I needed bus fare, whatever. Then you come to the priest and he says, okay, I give you my forgiveness. Well, it's sort of like that old joke about the person who comes and he says, I committed adultery, and the priest says, well, give me $5 and go out and do it again, because we have a special 2 for 1, this week or something. And it's pretty well like saying, yes, you're forgiven, and if you go out and do it again, and then, come back and we'll forgive you again. That isn't what it's about. You can't go and do it again, and do it again, and do it again without struggling against it and trying to heal that passion, and trying to turn your life around. It's like being an alcoholic and saying, well, okay, I repent that I'm an alcoholic. And he says, you're forgiven, fine, go, goodbye. Well, you're going to go and drink again, of course. You're not going to turn your life around at all. So confession is the place where the priest acts as therapeutic. He acts as the therapist to, and now not like a psychotherapist, because priests aren't trained for that for the most part, but to help you find your way in your struggle against the things that are leading you away from God, building a wall between you and Jesus Christ. Sin amartia means to miss the mark or the goal. It does not mean to break the law. You miss the mark or the goal by falling into these things, but the mark or the goal, of course, is union with God through Jesus Christ. And saying, well, I'm sorry I broke a law, that doesn't do it. That isn't what it's about. It's seeking help to change, to turn your life around. And also seeking help when you are burdened down with grief and sorrow that sometimes seem too much to handle. And if the priest needs to, if he has, might genuinely not have time to spend a few hours with you, because so many of our priests have to work at full-time jobs and try to raise a family and try to be a priest, all three. Sometimes because the parish can't afford to pay the priest enough, sometimes because the parishioners are just too stingy and tight to give a fair and decent salary to the priest. And in any case, they're the ones who are being cheated because the priest has to be burdened with all these extra things and can't give them the time that they actually need. So this is the thing about confession now. A priest can, and this does happen, I mean there are priests who send people here to this monastery for confession because he realizes they're going to need somebody to sit with them for 2 or 3 hours, or there's something that perhaps he feels he doesn't have the experience to deal with, or any number of reasons. The parishioner might have a special hatred for the parish priest or be so angry with him, or in some cases some woman might think she's in love with the parish priest. Now that happens a lot. You have clergy groupies sometimes. Well, the priest can't hear the confession of a person like that at all. So he would have to send them to another parish priest, or send them to whatever monastery is nearby for confession. And we have a number of people exactly like that who come to the monastery for confession because the priest feels that it's better for them to come here because they can get more time for their confession to be heard. And it might be, somebody comes and tells the priest, I hate your guts, I don't trust you. Well, is the priest going to sit down and hear their confession then? So let's send them to a monastery or to another parish priest for confession. I know some of our priests in our day are so cultish that they would never dare to even allow one of the parishioners to go to someone else for confession because they think they own the parishioners' souls. But that's a sickness on the part of the priest. And it needs to be gotten over. It's just like we have already Canadian philitism here in Canada. I mean, genuine philitism going on among some of the Canadian-born priests. And so we have these issues, and there are reasons why people go to a different priest for confession than the parish priest where they are. They should do it with consultation with the priest, even ask his blessing for it. But for the priest to withhold the blessing for it, this is uncalled for and out of order, really. The priest does not own the souls of his parishioners. But anyway, confession, always and in always has to be part of a healing process. It is not a place where you are punished and given a recipe for self-atonement and then told that God forgives you. But not really, you have to go punish yourself, then he'll actually forgive you. See, he just gives you a partial forgiveness, a parole or something, until you go punish yourself, or until you're punished for this sin. That's not, when we give a person epithemia, it's because they need it, not because God needs it. A person who's swindled customers for years and years cannot reconcile himself with his conscience, and forgive himself unless he makes some kind of restitution. And, very often, since he won't know how much he took from what people, he can't be quite like Zacchaeus in a smaller community. You tell him, well, all right, give, maybe $5,000 or $6,000 to Project Mexico or something like that. And this helps to clear his conscience, you see. The epithemia we give people in confession is to help them reconcile themselves with their conscience, not to help them reconcile themselves with God or to be forgiven by God, but so they can forgive themselves and be at peace with their own conscience. That is the healing process, the spiritual healing that should take place in confession. Okay, thank you, and God bless you all, and good night. I do invite you also, as we mentioned, to tune in to Radio Orthodox Canada for the audio broadcasts that are presented for people who have audio means of listening, but not necessarily the computer at hand. Also, we can make longer presentations on podcast than we can on YouTube. So good night, God bless you, and please keep us in your prayers, and let us hear from you what you would like to have discussed in these broadcasts. Thank you, and God bless.